Carnivals are built to make danger feel temporary. The lights are too bright. The music is too loud. The screams are supposed to end when the ride stops, or when the curtain opens, or when someone laughs and says it was all fake. That is the promise people accept when they walk through the gates. For one night, fear becomes entertainment. A painted face is only a costume. A dark hallway is only a set. A body in the corner is only part of the attraction. But sometimes, the thing people are trained to ignore is the only thing they should have looked at. On September 20th, in Hutchinson, Kansas, Kimberly Oliver went to the Kansas State Fairgrounds with her boyfriend, Tommy Clark, hoping one night at the fair might help her feel normal again after months of grief. Her best friend, Alison Smith, had disappeared earlier that summer. No one knew where she had gone. No one knew what had happened to her. And by the time the fair opened for its final night, most people had already learned how to keep walking. But inside one haunted attraction, behind fake stone walls, stage fog, and recorded screams, Kimberly saw something no one else had noticed. A necklace, small, silver, heart-shaped, and engraved with two initials that changed the meaning of everything around her. Because the most horrifying thing at the fair was not hiding in the dark, it was standing in plain sight. And everyone had walked past her. I had not wanted to go to the fair. That is what I remember most clearly now, because everyone who came by afterward acted like the decision had meant something, like it was fate. Like Tommy had chosen the wrong night, or I had chosen the wrong ride, or the two of us had walked into that haunted house because some quiet part of me already knew what was waiting inside. But it was not like that. It was September 20th in Hutchinson, Kansas, the last day the fair would be open, the kind of evening that still felt warm at first, but had just enough of a chill underneath it to remind you that summer was ending whether you were ready for it or not. Tommy Clark wanted to take me because he thought I needed to get out of my apartment. He was right. That was the part I hated. For most of the summer, I had been inside my own head in a way I could not explain to people without sounding dramatic. I went to class. I answered texts. I sat through lectures and highlighted things I did not remember reading. I ate when Tommy brought food over. I slept when I finally got too tired to keep checking my phone. But some part of me had stayed stuck in June. June was when I got sick. It was nothing serious at first. Just a fever that would not break. Swollen glands. The kind of body ache that made my bones feel full of wet sand. I missed 3 days of work study, 2 exams I had to reschedule, and the spring fair that came through Hutchinson for one weekend. I remember Alison making fun of me for being dramatic. Not in a mean way. Alison Smith had this way of teasing you that somehow made you feel included. She leaned against the frame of my bedroom door that Friday afternoon, holding 2 paper bags from the pharmacy, one with medicine and one with the candy she claimed was medicinal because it had fruit flavoring. "You look like Victorian tuberculosis," she said. I threw a pillow at her and missed by a foot. She laughed so hard, she almost dropped the bags. Alison had been my best friend since our first year of college. We met because both of us showed up to the wrong freshman orientation group and decided it would be less embarrassing to stay there together than admit we were lost. After that, we became inseparable in the way people do when they are away from home for the first time and need someone to witness the small disasters: bad dining hall food, first failed quizzes, laundry machines that ate quarters, boys who said they were not like other guys and then behaved exactly like other guys. Tommy came later. Alison approved of him before I did, which was usually how I knew something was safe. "He has golden retriever energy," she told me once. "He plays baseball." Exactly. Golden retriever with scheduling conflicts. Tommy was sweet in a way that sometimes embarrassed him. He held doors without making a performance of it. He remembered which gas station sold the iced coffee I liked. He had a way of standing slightly in front of me when we crossed busy streets, like traffic was personal. He had wanted the 3 of us to go to the spring fair together. Alison said she would go ahead with some people from campus and come back with pictures. She said she would ride the worst rides first, so she could give me a safety report. She said she would win me something ugly. That was the last normal conversation I ever had with her. She disappeared the next night. The police said she had been seen near the edge of the temporary fair setup around 10:40 p.m. Security footage caught her leaving one of the food rows alone, holding a lemonade in one hand and her phone in the other. After that, The cameras lost her near a service access lane behind the portable bathrooms and storage trailers. There were searches, posters, campus emails, interviews. Her parents came from Salina and stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks, then 3. They walked around campus with printed pictures of Alison, even after everyone already knew her face. Her mother wore sunglasses indoors because she kept crying without warning. Her father carried a folder full of timelines and maps. I helped at first. Then I stopped being useful. There is a kind of guilt that settles into your body when someone you love disappears and you are too sick to be with them. It does not matter that sickness is not a choice. It does not matter that you could not have known. Your mind still circles the same impossible thought. If I had gone, she might not have been alone. By September, people had started saying her name less often, not because they cared less, because life has a way of protecting itself. Classes resumed. Football started. The campus sidewalks filled again with students carrying coffees and backpacks and complaints about parking. New people arrived who had never met Alison, only seen the flyers fading on corkboards by the elevators, but I still looked for her everywhere. In library windows, across parking lots, in the backs of lecture halls, I saw her hair on strangers, her coat, her walk. Once, in a grocery store, I followed a girl down 2 aisles because she had the same green backpack Alison used to carry. When she turned around, she looked nothing like her, and I stood there holding a box of crackers, like I had forgotten how shopping worked. Tommy noticed all of it. He never told me to move on. He never said what people say when they want grief to become more convenient. He just kept showing up. On the morning of September 20th, he texted me a picture of the fairgrounds entrance from some article online. "Last day," he wrote. Then, a minute later, "No pressure." Then, actually slight pressure, because I already bought tickets. I stared at the message for a long time. I did not want to go, but I also did not want to spend another night in my apartment listening to the upstairs neighbor's television through the ceiling and refreshing the local news, hoping for an update I was terrified to receive. So I wrote back, "Fine, but no spinning rides." Tommy sent 3 celebration emojis and 1 solemn oath. By the time he picked me up, the light had turned that late September gold that makes everything look softer than it is. Tommy drove an old silver Honda with a cracked passenger side mirror and a pine air freshener that had given up months earlier. He had cleaned the car badly. I could tell because the usual fast food bags were gone, but the cup holders still had sticky rings in them. He smiled when I got in. "You look nice." "I'm wearing jeans." "Good jeans." I looked out the window before he could see my face change. It was not that I did not want to be happy. That was the thing nobody understood. I wanted to feel normal so badly that it hurt. I wanted to be the girl who went to the fair with her boyfriend and complained about overpriced funnel cake. I wanted to laugh at stupid games and hold his hand in lines and take pictures under carnival lights. I just did not know how to do that while Alison was still missing. The drive to the Kansas State Fairgrounds took less than 15 minutes from campus, but it felt longer because Tommy kept trying not to seem like he was trying. He talked about one of his professors, a guy from his intramural team who had pulled a hamstring trying to show off. A new taco truck, someone said, was set up near the livestock barns. I answered enough to keep the conversation alive. When we got close, traffic slowed. Cars lined up in both directions. Families crossed between parking rows carrying jackets and plastic bags. Kids pressed their faces to windows. Somewhere beyond the entrance, I could see the tops of rides rotating against the sky, all metal arms and blinking bulbs. The fair looked exactly how fairs always look from a distance. Bright, temporary, harmless. Tommy found parking in a dusty lot near the far edge of the grounds. As soon as we stepped out, the air changed. It smelled like fried dough, livestock, spilled soda, trampled grass, and diesel from generators. Music overlapped from 3 different directions. A country song from one booth, a pop song from a ride, the tinny mechanical jingle of a game where kids tried to knock down clowns with beanbags. People moved in every direction at once. Parents pushing strollers, teenagers in groups too large for the walkways, older couples with paper cups of lemonade, vendors calling out from booths lit with bare bulbs. Tommy reached for my hand. I let him. For the first hour, it almost worked. That is hard to admit now. There were moments when I forgot for a few seconds. Tommy bought me a lemonade and burned his tongue on a corn dog because he bit into it too soon. He insisted on trying the basketball game, even after I told him the rim looked bent. "It's not bent," he said. "Tommy, it's regulation adjacent." He missed 5 shots in a row. The man running the booth did not even try to hide his boredom. Tommy paid for another round. "Do not make this a masculinity thing," I told him. It became a masculinity thing when that 8-year-old made 2 before me. On the second round, he made 1 shot. The booth worker handed him a small stuffed bear with one eye slightly higher than the other. Tommy presented it to me like it was a rescued animal. "For you. This bear has seen things. All the best bears have." I laughed. Not much, but enough that Tommy looked relieved in a way that made my chest ache. We walked past the livestock buildings, past a row of food trucks, past a group of kids with glow necklaces running circles around a tired-looking father. The sun dropped lower. The shadows under the rides grew longer and more complicated. At some point, we passed a game booth with a wall of hanging prizes, and for one sharp second, I thought of Alison. Not because of the prizes, because she had promised to win me something ugly. The memory came so suddenly that I stopped walking. Tommy noticed immediately. "You okay?" I looked at the stuffed bear under my arm. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." He did not believe me, but he nodded. "We can leave whenever you want." I almost said yes. Then somewhere ahead of us, a siren wailed from one of the rides, and the crowd cheered as people spun overhead. Lights flickered on as dusk deepened. The fair shifted into its nighttime version, the one that always felt more alive and more unreal. Bulbs chased each other around signs. Smoke from food stands thickened in the cooling air. Every surface seemed to reflect color. For a while, I let myself move through it. Tommy tried the ring toss and failed. He tried the milk bottle game and accused the bottles of being weighted. He bought a funnel cake and got powdered sugar down the front of his shirt. I took a picture of him before he could brush it off. "That's blackmail," he said. "That's documentation." He smiled. And, for that moment, in the middle of the noise and lights and sugar smell, I understood what he had been trying to give me. Not closure. Not distraction. A few minutes of being 21 years old again. We were near the south end of the fairgrounds when we saw the haunted house. It was not a permanent building. It was one of those traveling attractions built into a connected trailer system, with a facade attached to the front to make it look like an old manor. Fake shutters hung crookedly beside blacked-out windows. A plastic gargoyle crouched over the ticket entrance. Fog rolled from a machine hidden behind a plywood cemetery fence. The sign above the entrance read, "Mortimer's House of the Unliving." The letters were painted to look like dripping blood. A recorded scream played every 30 seconds from a speaker that crackled at the edges. Tommy stopped. "Oh, we have to." "No, yes. No spinning rides and no haunted houses. You only said no spinning rides." I spiritually included haunted houses. He grinned. "Come on, it'll be dumb." That was his argument. It'll be dumb. And honestly, that was why I agreed. A dumb haunted house sounded manageable. Fake skeletons, rubber bats, teenagers in masks jumping out from behind curtains. It was exactly the kind of cheap, controlled fear that normal people paid for because they knew it would end. There was a line of maybe 20 people waiting, mostly teenagers, a few couples, 2 parents with a boy who kept insisting he would not be scared. A worker stood at the entrance wearing black coveralls and white face paint that had started to crack around his mouth. He looked younger than I expected, maybe mid-20s, with lank brown hair tucked under a battered top hat. He had a name tag pinned crookedly to his chest, but the lighting made it hard to read. He clicked a handheld counter every time people went in. When we reached the front, he looked at Tommy first, then me. His eyes lingered just long enough for me to notice. "2?" he asked. "2," Tommy said. The worker smiled without showing his teeth. "Stay together. No touching the actors. No flash photography. If you get scared, keep moving. The house only feeds if you stop." He said it like he had said it 1,000 times that night and hated every person who made him repeat it. Tommy handed him the tickets. The worker tore them slowly. Then he looked at me again. "You been through before?" I shook my head. "No." "Huh," he said. There was something in the way he said it that made me uncomfortable. But before I could decide why, he pulled back the black curtain. "Enjoy the house." Tommy squeezed my hand. The first room smelled like fog machine chemicals and old carpet. The walls were painted in streaks of gray and black. A strobe light pulsed from somewhere overhead, turning Tommy's face into a series of frozen expressions. A plastic skeleton hung upside down in the corner, slowly rotating from a wire. A speaker whispered nonsense in a loop. At first, it was exactly as stupid as Tommy promised. A fake corpse sat up in a coffin with a pneumatic hiss. I screamed, then immediately laughed because the corpse's wig slid sideways as it dropped back down. Tommy laughed harder than I did. "Terrifying craftsmanship," he whispered. "Shut up." We moved through a narrow hallway, lined with hanging strips of black rubber. Something brushed my cheek, and I flinched. Tommy walked ahead, holding the strips aside like curtains. The next room was staged as a butcher shop. Foam body parts hung from hooks. A man in a blood-spattered apron slammed a rubber cleaver on a table as we passed. Tommy jumped. I looked at him. "Golden Retriever," I said. "Do not tell Alison." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Both of us went quiet. The actor in the apron slammed the cleaver again, but the moment had already collapsed. Tommy looked back at me, guilt all over his face. "Kim, I'm sorry. It's okay. It was not okay. But it was not his fault either." We kept moving. That is one of the details I still think about. How often people keep moving because stopping would make something real. The haunted house was longer than it looked from outside. It bent back on itself through connected trailers and temporary walls, each section designed to disorient you. There were uneven floors, sudden air blasts, hidden speakers, mirrors clouded with fake handprints. Some rooms had actors, some only had props. A nursery full of broken dolls. A hallway of hanging chains. A dining room scene with mannequins seated around a table, their heads wrapped in gauze. In the dark, everything looked almost convincing for half a second. Then your eyes adjusted, and you saw the seams, the plastic hands, the stapled fabric, the dust on fake cobwebs. That is how the mind protects itself in places like that. It searches for evidence of construction, proof that someone made it, proof that fear is only decoration. Near the end, we entered a section that was colder than the others. The floor changed from soft temporary carpet to something harder, probably plywood painted black. The smell changed too. Less fog machine, more damp fabric, more metal. I remember noticing that. I remember thinking one of the generators must have been blowing air through a wet part of the trailer. There was a low sound playing in that section. Not music. More like a breath being dragged through a pipe. The walls were dressed to look like a crypt. Fake stone panels, battery candles, skulls tucked into little alcoves. Bodies wrapped in stained cloth were mounted upright along both sides of the hallway, as if they had been sealed into the walls. Mummies. That was what they were supposed to be. Some had their heads bowed. Some had their mouths open. Some had plastic hands reaching from torn wrappings. Tommy relaxed again. "Oh, this is very Scooby-Doo," he said. I smiled because I wanted to. We walked slowly, because the hallway narrowed. My shoulder brushed one of the wrapped bodies on the left, and I recoiled from the texture. Not rubber, cloth, stiff with some kind of coating. "Gross," I said. "That means it's working." Halfway down the hall, a hidden air cannon went off beside Tommy's ankle. He cursed and jumped into me. I laughed despite myself. Then I saw her. She was mounted on the right wall, near the end of the crypt section, slightly higher than the others, angled so her body leaned forward from a shallow recess. Her arms were bound across her torso, with strips of brown-stained fabric. Her head tilted to the side. Most of her face was covered, but part of her cheek and jaw were visible through the wrapping. At first, I registered her the same way I had registered every other prop. A shape, a scare object, something meant to be glanced at, and escaped. Then the light flickered. One of the fake candles below her gave off a weak amber pulse, and I saw the necklace. It rested against the dark, hardened cloth at the base of her throat. Small, silver, heart-shaped. The chain had slipped partly under the wrappings, but the pendant was visible. Tarnished, but visible. A little heart with engraving across the front. K+A. My body stopped before my mind understood why. Tommy took 2 more steps and realized I was not beside him. Kim? I could not answer. The hallway sounds kept going. The low breathing. The distant screams from other rooms. The thump of bass from somewhere outside. Behind us, another group entered the crypt section, laughing and bumping into each other. I stepped closer to the wall. The body's head hung at an angle that looked uncomfortable even for a prop. The exposed skin was not the right color, but it also was not the wrong color in the way latex is wrong. It was gray-brown and tight, drawn back against the cheekbone. The lips were mostly covered. A few strands of hair were caught in a cloth near the neck. Light brown hair. Alison's hair had been light brown. No. That was my first thought. Just no. Because the mind rejects impossible things before it examines them. No. 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 The group behind us came closer. One of the girls laughed and said, "Ew, that one's nasty." She pointed at the body, at Alison. I turned so fast she stepped back. Tommy came to my side. "What is it?" I lifted my hand toward the necklace, but did not touch it. My fingers shook so badly they looked separate from me. "That's hers," I said. "What?" "The necklace." Tommy looked at the pendant. He did not understand at first. I saw the moment he did. His face changed, but carefully, like he was afraid sudden movement would make me break. "Kimberly," he said, very softly. I gave that to Alison. The group behind us had stopped laughing. Someone muttered, "Come on." Tommy moved closer to the mounted body. "Are you sure?" I looked at him. He knew as soon as he asked that it was the wrong question, but I understood why he asked it, because if I was not sure, then the world could stay intact for a few more seconds. I stared at the pendant. Freshman year. A booth at a campus craft market. Alison holding 2 necklaces and saying matching jewelry was cheesy unless it was ironic. Me choosing the small silver heart because the woman selling them said she could engrave initials on the spot. K+A. Kimberly and Alison. We joked that it stood for known associates because we were both watching too many crime documentaries. Alison wore it to exams, parties, late-night study sessions. She wore it in the missing poster photo because that picture had been taken at my birthday dinner in April. "I'm sure," I said. A boy behind us laughed nervously. "Is this part of it?" I turned toward him. "Get out," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Get out of here." My voice did not sound like mine. Tommy grabbed my hand, not to pull me away, but to anchor me. "We need to find somebody," he said. "No," I said. "No, we can't leave her. Kim, listen to me. That's Alison. I know. You don't know. I believe you." That stopped me. He said it firmly, without hesitation. "I believe you." The words held me upright. Tommy turned to the group behind us. "Go get the worker at the entrance, now." Nobody moved for half a second. Then, one of the girls ran back down the hallway, pushing through the hanging strips at the end of the previous room. The others followed, not because they understood, but because fear spreads faster when people do not know what shape it is supposed to take. Tommy took out his phone. There was no signal inside the trailer. "Of course," he whispered. I kept staring at Alison. Once I knew, I could not unknow. The proportions were wrong for a prop. Too specific. One shoulder sat lower than the other. Alison had broken that collarbone in high school soccer, and it healed slightly uneven. I had seen her complain about backpack straps because of it. Her wrist, half visible under a strip of cloth, was too thin. The wrapping around her throat had been placed carefully, but not carefully enough to hide the necklace. Why would he leave it? That question came later, over and over. Why would he leave it? Maybe he did not know what it meant. Maybe he thought no one would look closely. Maybe he wanted someone to... A door opened somewhere behind us. The normal haunted house sound was interrupted by an annoyed voice. "Keep moving, folks." The worker from the entrance pushed into the crypt hallway with a flashlight in one hand. The cracked white face paint made him look unfinished. Behind him stood the girl who had run out, pale and breathing hard. "This girl's freaking out," the worker said. "You can't block the path." Tommy stepped between him and me. "We need lights on." The worker looked at him. "That's not how this works." "That's a real body." For the first time, the worker's expression changed. Not shock. I noticed that immediately. Not confusion. Something smaller. Something like calculation. Then it disappeared. He rolled his eyes. Yeah, man. It's a haunted house. No, Tommy said. We need police. The worker's gaze shifted to me. I was still looking at Alison. His voice lowered. You touched anything? The question cut through the noise. Tommy noticed too. What? I said. Did she touch anything? No. The worker moved closer. The hallway felt too narrow. Too cold. We get this every year, he said. Somebody thinks something's real. Somebody panics. You need to exit. I looked at him then, really looked. Under the face paint, I knew him. Not well, not by name at first. But I had seen him on campus. Maintenance, maybe. Or event staff. One of those people your brain records as background because they are always moving equipment, unlocking doors, carrying crates through service entrances while students step around them. He had been in the student union sometimes. Near the theater department. Near the bulletin boards, where Alison's missing poster had been taped for months. My stomach turned. You work at school, I said. His eyes went still. Tommy looked at me, then at him. The worker smiled again, but this time it looked forced. A lot of people work a lot of places. What's your name? Tommy asked. The worker ignored him. You need to leave. No, I said. He took one step toward me. Tommy moved immediately. Back up. The worker's flashlight beam swung down, then up again. For 1 second, it passed across Alison's body, across the necklace, across the stiff cloth pulled tight around her throat. His jaw flexed. Then we heard another voice from the far end of the hallway. What's going on? An older man in a black staff shirt appeared from the exit side, ducking under a low beam. Behind him, more people had gathered, confused and annoyed, and starting to whisper. The haunted house sounds continued absurdly around us, screams and breathing and mechanical rattles. Tommy raised his voice. Call 911. The older man frowned. What? Call 911 right now. The entrance worker snapped. It's nothing. She's having some kind of episode. I turned on him. My best friend has been missing since June, I said. That is her necklace. That is her body. Call the police. The hallway went quiet in the way crowds go quiet when something stops being entertainment. The older man looked from me to the mounted figure, then to the worker. What the hell is she talking about, Evan? Evan. That was his name. As soon as I heard it, something unlocked in my memory. Evan Rusk. He worked campus facilities. I had seen his name embroidered on a dark work shirt once while he repaired a door in our dorm building. Alison had been there. She had complained afterward that he stared too much and said something weird about her necklace. Not threatening, not enough to report. Just weird. I had forgotten it because at the time it was only a bad feeling. Evan's face tightened. The older man lifted his radio. Shut it down, he said. House is closed. Get everyone out. Evan grabbed his arm. Don't do that. The older man pulled away. What is wrong with you? Everything happened quickly after that, but my memory breaks it into pieces. The radio crackling. People backing out of the hallway. Tommy pulling me away from Alison because the older staff member told us we had to preserve the scene. Me screaming that we could not leave her there. Evan moving toward the service door. Tommy shouting. 2 fair security officers coming in from the exit side. Evan running. The sound of plywood shaking as he slammed into a staff passage somewhere behind the crypt wall. I remember being outside again without understanding how I got there. The fair was still happening. That is another thing people do not understand unless they have lived through something like that. The world does not stop all at once. Outside Mortimer's house of the unliving, families were still walking past with cotton candy and stuffed animals. A ride spun in the distance, full of screaming kids who were only pretending to be afraid. Lights blinked. Music played. Someone complained because the haunted house had closed and they had already bought tickets. I stood near a temporary fence with Tommy's jacket around my shoulders, holding the ugly bear he had won me earlier. I do not remember picking it back up. Police arrived in layers. First fair security, then Hutchinson officers, then more police, Then, men and women who did not wear uniforms but carried cameras and evidence bags. They taped off the haunted house. They widened the perimeter. They made people move back. Someone asked me questions. Then someone else asked the same questions more carefully. I gave them Alison's full name, her age, the date she disappeared. I described the necklace. I told them where I had seen Evan before. Tommy stayed beside me until an officer separated us for statements. I watched the haunted house entrance the whole time. At some point, 2 officers brought Evan out from behind a service trailer. He was no longer wearing the top hat. The white paint on his face had smeared, giving him a strange melted look. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He kept his head down, but as they walked him past the taped area, he looked up once. Not at the police, at me. There was no rage in his face, no panic. That was the worst part. He looked almost disappointed, like I had interrupted something he thought belonged to him. I started shaking so badly that one of the paramedics made me sit down. They found Alison that night. Officially, they did not confirm it until later. But I knew. Her parents knew before the police told them. I think parents know certain things before language reaches them. Her mother arrived sometime after midnight, wearing a sweatshirt over pajama pants, her hair unbrushed. Her father held her upright with one arm and held that same folder in the other hand. When she saw me, she made a sound I still hear sometimes in my sleep. Not a scream, something lower, something that had been waiting in her body for 3 months. I tried to stand, but my legs would not work. She came to me instead. She put both hands on my face and asked me where. Not what happened. Not, are you sure? Just where. I said, inside. And she understood. The investigation took weeks, then months, though parts of it were clear almost immediately. Evan Rusk was 27 years old. He worked part-time facilities maintenance on campus and seasonal jobs for traveling attractions that came through central Kansas. He had helped assemble and dress several temporary fair attractions that year, including the haunted house in June and again in September. Alison had crossed paths with him more than once before she disappeared. Campus security footage showed him near her dorm 2 days before the spring fair. A work order placed him in the student union hallway where she studied. A witness later remembered seeing him talking to her near the fairground service lane the night she vanished. The police believed he approached her as someone familiar, not a stranger, not a man jumping from the dark, someone she had seen on campus enough times to underestimate. That detail made me sick in a different way, because danger is easier to imagine when it looks like danger. Evan had access to storage areas behind the attraction. He knew which trailers were locked. He knew when crowds were loudest. He knew how temporary structures were assembled, where blind spots were, which exits were used only by staff. He also knew people did not look closely inside haunted houses. That became the sentence every news station repeated. People do not look closely inside haunted houses. But that was not the whole truth. People looked. They laughed. They pointed. They screamed. They walked past her. For 3 months, Alison's body had been hidden in the one place where horror was expected to look real. During the spring fair, she had been concealed in a storage compartment behind one of the crypt panels. When the attraction was moved and rebuilt for the September fair, Evan had mounted her into the display wall, wrapping and sealing her body among the props. Investigators later said the conditions inside the enclosed trailer, the chemicals used, the drying air, and the materials he applied all contributed to the mummified appearance. I did not read the full report. I tried. I made it 3 pages and threw up in Tommy's bathroom. The part I could not stop thinking about was the necklace. Police asked me about it repeatedly because they needed to understand how I knew. I told them everything: the campus craft table, the engraving, the joke, the missing person photo. One detective asked whether Alison wore it every day. I said yes. Then he asked if Evan might have known that. I remembered Alison rolling her eyes after the maintenance worker in the dorm hallway said, "Cute necklace. Best friend thing?" I remembered how she had tucked it under her shirt afterward. At the time, we had laughed, not because it was funny, because that is what girls do when something feels wrong, but not wrong enough to become a story. We laugh and keep walking. The trial did not happen until the following year. By then, everyone knew the main facts. Evan confessed to parts of it and denied others. His attorney tried to argue that the display of the body was not part of the original crime, as if that distinction mattered to anyone who loved her. He never explained why he left the necklace visible. The prosecution said it was carelessness. I did not believe that. I think he wanted her to be seen without being recognized. I think that was part of it. To place her in front of hundreds of people and prove that he could control the meaning of her body. To make her into something people paid to be frightened by, then forgot before buying kettle corn. That is the kind of cruelty people miss when they focus only on the killing. There are things someone can do after death that feel like a second crime against everyone who is still alive. Alison's parents sat through every day of court. I sat through 3. On the 3rd day, they showed photographs of the crypt hallway. Not the close ones. Just the wide evidence images. The fake stone panels. The battery candles. The row of wrapped figures. The place where she had been mounted. I had seen that hallway in my dreams so many times that the photograph felt less real than my memory. Tommy held my hand under the bench. I looked at the picture and thought about the girl behind us in line saying, "Ew, that one's nasty." I do not blame her. That is important. I do not blame any of them. They were doing what people do in haunted houses. They were letting fear be fake because they had paid for it to be fake. They trusted the walls around them. They trusted the ticket booth and the painted sign and the worker tearing admission stubs at the entrance. They trusted the rules of the place. That was what Evan used. Not darkness, not a weapon. Trust. After he was convicted, people kept telling me they were glad there was justice. I never knew what to say to that. Justice is not the same as reversal. It does not take Alison out of that wall. It does not put her back in my doorway with pharmacy bags and stupid jokes. It does not give her mother the 3 months she spent begging strangers to look at a photograph while her daughter was already in plain sight. It only draws a line under the facts. This happened. This person did it. This is what the law can prove. Everything else stays with the people who walked out alive. I still have the bear Tommy won me. It sits in the back of my closet because I cannot throw it away and cannot stand to look at it for too long. One eye is still higher than the other. Powdered sugar stained one of its paws that night, though I do not remember touching it after we left the food row. Tommy and I stayed together for another year. Then we didn't. Not because he did anything wrong. Grief changes the shape of people, and sometimes 2 people who survive the same night still survive it differently. He wanted to move forward because standing still hurt him. I wanted to stand still because moving forward felt like leaving Alison behind. We loved each other. That was not enough to make us the same afterward. I graduated late. Alison never did. Her parents started a scholarship in her name for students in social work, which was what she had planned to study before switching majors twice and joking that she was collecting academic identities. I visit them sometimes. Not often enough. Her mother still wears a necklace with Alison's fingerprint pressed into silver. Her father still keeps timelines, though now they are about legislation and safety policies and background checks for temporary workers at public events. Every September, Hutchinson starts changing again. Banners go up, traffic patterns shift. Local businesses put fair-themed signs in their windows. People talk about concerts, livestock shows, rides, food stands, the things they eat every year, even though they complain about the price. I do not tell people not to go. That would be easier, maybe. To make the fair itself into the monster. To say carnivals are bad, crowds are bad, haunted houses are bad, darkness is bad, but places are not evil just because evil uses them. That is what makes it worse. The fair was full of ordinary people, having ordinary fun. Kids with sticky hands, couples on dates, parents taking pictures, workers counting tickets, teenagers pretending not to be scared, and inside one attraction, behind painted walls and fake candles, my best friend waited for someone to recognize what everyone had been trained not to see. The last time I went back to the fairgrounds, it was not during the fair. It was early morning in March, cold and windy, with the lots empty and the buildings quiet. Without the rides and lights, the place looked almost too large. Open pavement, chain-link fences, low buildings, the kind of space that holds noise and memory even when nothing is happening. I stood near where the haunted house had been set up. There was no marker, no sign, just gravel and flattened grass. I brought flowers, though I knew that was more for me than her. White carnations, because Alison hated roses and said they looked like flowers trying too hard. I set them down near the fence. For a while, I did not say anything. Then I told her I was sorry. Not because anyone told me I should, because I still was. Sorry I got sick. Sorry she went without me. Sorry I did not remember Evan's comment about the necklace until it was too late. Sorry that when the whole town was searching ditches and fields and highways, she was behind a wall where people laughed. The wind moved across the empty fairgrounds. Somewhere in the distance, metal clanged against metal. I thought about that hallway. The strobe lights, the fake fog, the recorded breathing, Tommy's hand in mine, the way my mind tried to reject the necklace before accepting what it meant. K+A, Kimberly, and Alison. Known associates. The stupidest joke. The only reason she was found. People ask me sometimes how I knew so quickly. They expect something dramatic. A face, a voice, a supernatural feeling. Some bond between best friends that cross death and darkness. It was not that. It was a piece of jewelry under bad lighting. It was an engraving small enough that almost anyone else would have missed it. It was the fact that I knew her in details. That is what love really is, I think. Not grand declarations. Not perfect memory. Details. The necklace she touched when she was nervous. The shoulder that sat slightly lower. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was annoyed. The candy she bought when I was sick. The ugly thing she promised to win for me. Evan counted on a crowd seeing a body and calling it decoration. He counted on everyone walking past her. And almost everyone did. But not everyone knew Alison. I did. You have reached the end of tonight's attraction. The point where the gates are closing, the midway lights are shutting down, and the sounds that felt harmless while you were inside the crowd begin to feel different once the fairgrounds go quiet. A final night at the carnival. A haunted house built to entertain. A missing girl everyone believed was somewhere else. All ordinary, all familiar. All built on the assumption that certain places come with rules. The screams are fake. The bodies are props. The darkness is controlled. And when the lights come on, the fear is supposed to end. But Kimberly learned that night that some horrors do not need to hide outside the crowd. Sometimes they stand directly in front of it, behind painted walls, under artificial candlelight, inside a hallway designed to make people laugh at what should have stopped them cold. Alison had not disappeared beyond reach. She had not been buried in some distant field, or hidden somewhere no one knew to search. She had been there, part of the attraction, part of the scenery, part of something hundreds of people were trained to walk past without looking too closely. Because that is what makes this story linger. Not only what Evan did, but how easily the setting protected it. A carnival tells you what to expect. A haunted house tells you how to react. A prop tells you not to question what you are seeing. And if something real is placed carefully enough inside something artificial, most people will trust the illusion before they trust the warning in their own mind. But Kimberly saw the detail that did not belong. A small silver heart. 2 engraved letters. One piece of Alison that the darkness failed to turn into decoration. She did not find her because she understood the crime. She found her because she knew the person. And sometimes, that is the only thing strong enough to break through what everyone else has been taught to ignore. So, if you take anything from tonight, let it be this. Do not assume something is harmless just because it appears where fear is expected. Do not assume a crowd makes a place safe. And do not confuse performance with control. Because sometimes the most disturbing thing in a haunted house is not what jumps out at you. Sometimes it is what stays still. What waits under bad lighting. What everyone sees, but no one recognizes. Thank you for listening. Let me know in the comments which detail stayed with you the longest. The fair, the haunted house, or the necklace. And until next time, watch what everyone else walks past. Trust the detail that does not belong, and remember, the dark awaits.